And we greet our next and final speaker on this panel, who will focus. Daniel Oduro Sem, a PhD candidate at the Waterloo Lutheran Seminary in Canada, will focus his presentation on the contentions over the public space, reconsidering religious and secular voices for peace and justice. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr.
And thank you for the organizers of ISEN. I'm privileged to stand here to actually, not to critique. No, it's not, there's no presentation, yeah. There's no presentation. The paper is with me. The paper came, but no presentation, no PowerPoint. Okay. So, what can I say to the group if this 25-page paper is to be presented within 10 to 15 minutes? Let's celebrate together. It is an attempt to actually examine my own ideology as well as my values. So let not any individual or any group think that this is a critique of what they believe in. Contentions over the public space. And my attempt is to reconsider the voices of both secularist liberals as well as the so-called Christians that we have in our contemporary democratic and pluralist cultures. The argument started with the idea that when a politician is entering the public realm, they could actually come with their own beliefs and practices. It started when people argued against this idea that a politician should embark upon their policies based on their values, philosophical doctrines, and what they believe in. And as you all know, we tend to forget about the role of the state, why the state exists. And we tend to forget that, contemporary society comprises people of diverse views, diverse cultures, diverse religious, upbringings. And so when politicians begin to favor a particular policy based on their belief, justice is not done. And as I said earlier on, I am the sympathizer of the liberal ideology because as a minority group, I find that liberalism provides the platform for every individual to actually advance themselves and to enjoy the liberal democracy wherever you come from. At the same time, I am actually worried about fundamentalist liberals, if I could coin that term. There are some fundamentalist liberals that they press the point to the extent that the neutrality and equality they are actually presenting is an agenda, a secret plot to actually make sure that religious convictions in the liberal politics completely disappear. And so this has been a fear of many, many theologians and Judeo-Christian philosophers in liberal democracies like in the United States, in Canada, in Australia, and in UK, New Zealand, and what have you. So this paper that I actually wrote is an attempt to critique both sides of the coin. I am, like I said earlier on, I am the liberal believer, but I don't believe in the idea that politicians can completely detach themselves from their political values if they are entering the public space. Neither will I endorse that politicians should come to the scene to preach dogma. That will not help for the sake of peace and justice. I don't know if I can summarize my thesis here that I can read for you from the conclusion that I draw. There are different types of liberals, ranging from John Rawls, Dawkins, Richard Rorty, and Stephen Macedo. We have soft kind of liberalism, such as Rawls, who stands for equality, fairness, and all that. I resonate with them and I sympathize with them, even though Christian theologians believe that it's not possible to be neutral. But Stephen Macedo, who actually argues and celebrates the American politicians who swell and are made or forced to say certain words that actually is not in the interest of their faith. I am against that. And so the critique of the work that I did in this paper is to examine what kind of public space that can promote peace and justice for all, including minority groups, including immigrants, including different religious traditions, such as, Buddhists, such as Hindus, such as Muslims, Christians, Jewish people. That's the kind of public space that I was looking for in this paper. So at the end of the day, when we talk about traditional practices, I categorize traditional rulers, elders, and our kings and queens as people who fit the category of minority because they are not invited into the public space, let's say, to allow them to contribute to the peace process. Why? My own grandmother was a queen mother in a village in Ghana. Growing up, I saw her and her wisdom in traditional conflict resolution. People would come to her, even though she lived in a patriarchal, male-domineering society, she was influential in conflict resolution. And yet, if my grandma was invited to attend a conference like this today, would she be able to contribute to the thorny human rights issues that we are talking about today? Because my grandma will have to contend for the rights of the gay, of the lesbian, of immigrants, and of everyone. That is going to be very challenging for her. So in part of this project, I also argue that for our traditionalists, for our elders, for our kings, for our queens, and all these community leaders to be actively involved in the peace process, they need also to kind of update themselves a little bit, update themselves with the human rights issues that are being issues we are tackling with, we are battling with in the public space. Because when it comes to the public space, it's not easy. And I look at neo-Calvinist theory of the state and define the state. There was a Dutch philosopher, Herman Duyewed. He actually defined the role of the state that I find very useful in my paper that I wish I could read it for us quickly. In my research, a Christian theory of the state that can function to build a public space needed to promote peace and justice is far from the Christian establishment thesis. According to Christian philosopher and political thinker Herman Duyewed, 1969, the state's primary role is to promote justice. The state thus plays a very significant role in every society. This main function of the state in a pluralist society cannot be traded in for something else. Politicians may have their own beliefs and aspirations, but their role in public justice may not be achieved if they primarily concern themselves to the preaching of doctrines at Congress, as we see in recent days. He writes, and I quote, "Neither internal ecclesiastical law nor internal industrial law can have the state's typical public judicial integrating function, however large the number of the members of a church or an industrial community might be," unquote. The state will cause more harm than good if it attempts to support and or promote any given particular interest group at the expense of others, whether directly or indirectly. A public space which enhances peace, justice, and prosperity in pluralist cultures has a unique relationship with all other competing groups in that society. And now listen to what, McCarthy and his co-hosts also said concerning the function of the state in pluralist culture. They said, when competing social groups lobby and exert pressure on the government for their cause, the state, quote, acts as an immoral power broker to maintain equilibrium among these many causes. That means when we have a platform, when we have political leaders, when we have politicians who are reigning over in a realm, in a community, in a society, they are not to side with any particular interest group. Otherwise, the peace that we talk about can never, ever be achieved. So in conclusion, the contested human rights issues that confront plural states nowadays makes it conflict resolution very difficult and peace-building efforts a complex issue to deal with. The intersection between church and state and the boundaries of faith, religion, and politics are at the core of liberal principles which have been responded to by both Judeo-Christian thinkers and religious fundamentalist traditionalists. If one rejects secular liberalism for its secret plot aimed at rooting out the existence of religious devotees, then in the same token, one cannot encourage public officials' effort to use political platform for the promotion of religious dogma. This is because the state's main function in pluralist democratic culture is to promote peace and justice for its citizens. Public officials and leaders in great nations characterized by diversity of cultures, different ideologies, beliefs, values, could acquire some skills to help them handle the contentions over the public space in our modern world. If they will critically analyze the arguments presented by both secular liberals and Judeo-Christian philosophers, which I did not actually have the time to present their sides. A sober reflection on the two schools of thought, that is, the secular liberals and Christian political thinkers, are to have recognition, to negotiate, to empathize, and to accept and have respect for the other, that is minority groups, which will ultimately help us promote peace, security, justice in our unjust world. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Dr. Sem, very much.
Not doctor yet.
Yes, I know.
But I claim that.
Yes, and Doctor, I aspire that you will be, and I think it will happen very soon. And I thank you again, Mr. and Mrs. Professors, both from Nigeria, for coming here and sharing, and again, illuminating with the facts on the ground, the inherent tension. The law, again, exists not in a vacuum. The law is many times at the vanguard. It is always, many times, equally conservative, reactive, but people on the ground, it always comes back to people. Will they embrace the law of their time? Will they reject it? If they reject it, why, how, when, and to what end? But all of these panels, in my view, again underscore the need for fluidity, for an appreciation of history, an appreciation of the limits of history, always seeking to create a new vision, both vertical and horizontal, disturbing fantasies, not assuming that if a man dies before a woman, that the woman did him wrong. Again, we come back to see how without a humanism that imbues any and all religions, that advises any and all political ideology, we are bankrupting our own collective humanity. And at the end of the day, harking back to the earlier panelists this afternoon in this space, it is the fraternity of each of our goodwill that allows the collective aggregate of our wisdom from wherever it springs to guide us to a more just world. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Yeah, before you leave, I also want to point out something which I think at some point, depending on how democratic a society is, at some point the state may need to take side. I say this because we have a very practical point. From the last presentation, from the part of the southern part of Nigeria where female circumcision and all of that Chinelu talked about before, I remember between 2007 and 2015, the female lawyers in Rivers State, where I come from, came together and said, look, these are the things that women were subjected to. And they came out, the female lawyers came up, and they proposed a bill. The governor, as at that time of my state, took side with the female lawyers. And the proposed bill was passed by the House of Assembly because the governor took personal interest in it. And today in my state, if you are found to be a perpetrator of female circumcision, you earn 21 years imprisonment. So depending on how democratic a system is, at some time the state may need to take its side to enable things go right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And actually, it's inconsistent with what I'm saying here, that unless a policy promotes peace and justice, which I believe if female circumcision is against human rights, it is not a practice that has to be continued. It's against, human rights. It won't promote peace and justice. And I didn't have the time to actually explain myself what peace and justice means. Thank you.
Thank you.